All right, everyone, we're about to begin. I have the distinct honor of introducing Sophie Pikel this morning. Sophie is an alum of Sinai Akiba Academy. She is a ninth grader at Windward, and she is one of our Nazarian Fellows, and she will be introducing our scholar in residence this morning. After I'm done.
Shabbat Shalom. My name is Sophia Pikel, and I'm one of the Sinai Temple Nazarian Fellows. For those of you who may not have heard of the Nazarian Fellowship, it is a program for Sinai Temple teens who wish to cultivate their leadership skills and passion for Israel advocacy and education. First, I'd like to welcome all of you to this fantastic Scholar in Residence lecture. And in doing so, we have to acknowledge Abner and Roslyn Goldstine, whose generosity and passion for Judaism have brought about this opportunity. Today, I've been given the distinct honor of introducing Rabbi Dr. Donniel Hartman. Rabbi Dr. Donniel Hartman is president of the Shalom Hartman Institute and holds the Kaufman Family Chair in Jewish Philosophy. He is author of the highly regarded 2016 book, Putting God Second, How to Save Religion from Itself, and is the host of the award-winning For Heaven's Sake, one of the most popular Jewish podcasts in North America. Rabbi Hartman is the founder of some of the most extensive education, training, and enrichment programs for scholars, educators, rabbis, and religious leaders in Israel and North America. He is a prominent essayist, blogger, and lecturer on issues of Israeli politics, policy, Judaism, and the Jewish community. He has a PhD in Jewish philosophy from the Hebrew University, an MA in political philosophy from New York University, an MA in religion from Temple University, and rabbinic ordination from the Shalom Hartman Institute. Rabbi Hartman is the author of The Boundaries of Judaism, co-author of Spheres of Jewish Identity, and co-editor of Judaism and the Challenges of Modern Life. His newest book, Who Are the Jews and Who Can We Become, was published in November of 2023. In introducing Rabbi Hartman, I can only share with you what it feels like for me to have him here. Now more than ever, we are in need of individuals to inspire us, to guide us, and to make us think. The opportunity not just to learn from, but to learn with Rabbi Hartman will be an experience to be treasured. With that, please join me in welcoming Rabbi Hartman.
Shabbat Shalom. Today I want to talk about Israel of tomorrow. If I would have come here at the beginning of, I don't even know when it was, the end of October, beginning of November, at that time I wouldn't have been able to talk about Israel of tomorrow, because we had no space to even begin to think about the question. On October 7th, we were consumed by our experiences today. We were exhausted by them. We also didn't know what the future, we couldn't even think about the future. All we were trying to digest Did I aggravate somebody? So quick? No, not yet? Good. Soon. I'm going to work on it. On October 7th, our army failed us. And our army is not supposed to fail us. On October 7th, our political leadership failed us. That's kind of regular. But not to that degree. Not to that degree. The basic covenant between Israel and its leadership, in which you take the sacred task of guiding our people, and your primary responsibility is to keep us safe. When your leadership fail you, when your army, which is always above dispute fails you. There was a deep sense of being lost, of a void. How do we put these pieces back together again? But on October 7th, the Jewish people did not fail each other. Already on October 7th, without even being called up, people just heard they started to race down south. They started to call up their units and say, I'm coming. Before the army even had a chance to draft reserves, the reserves were flocking. The army wasn't prepared to even bring people down south, so citizens did it. Citizens started to create these WhatsApp groups. Who is in the army who needs to get where? We're going to take you. Who needs equipment? Who's being left behind? What do they need? The Jewish people never let us down. Not only did they never let us down, October 7th brought out the best of Israeli society. Since October 7th, our soldiers haven't let us down. They have been fighting with a courage, with a purpose, with a willingness to sacrifice that I don't remember. I've been living in Israel since 1971. I have never seen anything which even approaches the sense of responsibility, commitment, selflessness. Never. It's a difficult time, but it is also a remarkable time in Israel. It's like you're living sometimes in two different universes. When you encounter soldiers, you are humbled. When you live in the midst of a people, and everybody has been to tens of funerals. Everybody walks with people who have children in Gaza, spouses in Gaza. Walking with people who are trying to get through the day. Some are able to do more, some are able to do less. We have about 300-400 employees at Hartman. And I told everybody, no one has to do anything. Do whatever you can. Some people worked at 10%, some people at 20%. Said there's no demands, none. You decide what you could do, and that's going to be fine. And you saw this all across the country. Teachers having to take care of students while their husbands or wives aren't home. To see this level of responsibility, to see this society replacing failed governmental institutions, to see people just standing up and saying in so many different ways, whether it was to be drafted, and we, unprecedented 150%, as you know, are showing up to serve. People are calling, why didn't you call me up? One of the reasons why we didn't have enough ceramic vests is because we had too many people. We never thought we would need that number. So while we face this void, this uncertainty, the pain, and the mourning and the trauma. Israeli society did not wallow in trauma. It felt it, it defined them, and at the same time, everyone in our country marshaled to ask, how do I help? What can I do? And it's because of Israeli society that we now have a luxury to start talking about, so what's going to be tomorrow? Because you can't really ask the government what's going to be tomorrow, because they're not providing any answers. It actually seems to be pretty clear that they don't have a strategy at all. They can't articulate a strategy because they don't agree. And so therefore the solution is to act together without a strategy, sort of on a 24-hour basis. The job of the army is not to have a strategy. The job of an army in a democratic country is to implement the strategy of a government. And there could be many strategies for Gaza, but our army is given many of them on an ongoing basis, very often conflicting. But as we enter into stage 3 of a war that might last for years, we no longer have the luxury not to ask the question, Israel tomorrow. And I'm going to say this now and repeat it again and again. The answers to Israel tomorrow are not going to come from our political leadership. The answers of Israel tomorrow are going to come from the unbelievable strength, courage, conviction of a remarkable people who got up and said, the present and future of Israel is on my shoulders. And I want to outline 3 or 4 areas of Israel tomorrow that are critical for us to think about. Some are exhilarating, and some are profoundly troubling. But Israel, the survival of Israel, its future, require of us to ask these questions and to confront reality as it presents itself to us. And so, the first core challenge of Israel tomorrow is, how do we live with the limitations of our power? We were raised, many of you were raised, in an Israel in which its power could achieve anything we want. In Hebrew, there's a saying, Tzahal yeda ech lahagiv. Tzahal will know how to respond, and it will do so correctly and appropriately at the right time and the right measure. You could trust the army. We have all the power that we need for whatever strategy that we come up with. Now that's a great fantasy. Now it's actually a necessary fantasy because it's not easy to live in the Middle East. How do you feel normal in the Middle East despite this uncertainty? We've been feeding, and I've been speaking about this, on what I call a messianic Zionism. A messianic Zionism in which we believe that Israel and Zionism has an answer to any problem that we are facing, whether Jews around the world or whether the Jews and citizens of Israeli society. Israel is the answer to the flawed, non-messianic existence of world Jewry and diaspora life for 2,000 years. For 2,000 years, you had to live with aspirations. For 2,000 years, you had to live with limitations. For 2,000 years, you had to live with failure. No longer. Israel is a redemptive reality which will solve the problems of the Jews. We just have to decide. One of the deep ramifications, not of October 7th, but of December 4th, 18th, 21st, January 5th, 16th, now in February, is that everybody in Israel is slowly but surely internalizing that it doesn't matter what bombastic speech Netanyahu gives for whatever reason. We're not going to be achieving what it is that we wanted to achieve. The war starts. Yes, the center is the north. We're going to capture northern Gaza. No, it's now the city of Gaza. No, it's Khan Yunis. No, it's Rafiah. It's Upper Gaza, Lower Gaza. Everybody now knows what we didn't dare talk about on October 8th. An Entebbe moment is not going to happen. A 6-day war moment is not going to happen. We're going to be able to improve the safety of the people who live in the South. We are not going to be capable of guaranteeing their safety. What does it mean for people who live in the North to go back home? How do they go back home? We could tell them and make declarations. Everything is fine. But you were able to make that declaration on October 6th. You could say to them, don't worry, we have it under control. You can make that declaration on October 6th. Even on October 8th, till mid-November, you can make that declaration. Today, on February 10th, you can't make that declaration. We have skilled, evil enemies who we do not necessarily have the means to defeat them. But what does that mean for Israel tomorrow? And by the way, it has a lot of implications for you. Part of what it means is that we as Jews have to learn how to love, get up in the morning, raise children, have children, build a life in the midst of greater uncertainty than we've experienced in the last 2 decades. How do you go back to the North or the South and know that it might not always be okay? I want to promise you that it will be. But that's not our reality. Oh, we're going to take on Hezbollah. You think Israel really wants to? Some people do. Oh, trust me. We don't have a strategy to take over Hezbollah. You can't. And we've never defeated them, nor can we. The closest we have for a strategy against Hezbollah is destroying all infrastructure of Lebanon so that Lebanese society will place some pressure on the Hezbollah. We don't have the ability to destroy the largest non-governmental army in the world. We might be able to limit their ability to harm us, but we can't remove it. We have iron domes, unbelievable. But they're watching. And they say, I see your iron dome. I have 2 plans. In an all-out war, I am going to overload your system. I have 150,000 missiles. You're not going to... I just need 10% to get through. But in the event that I don't want a total warfare, who here heard of the coronet? Ask Israelis what a coronet is. Coronet is an anti-tank missile, which used to have a capacity to take out a tank from 3 kilometers, a little more sophisticated and deadly than an RPG. Today, the coronet travels with laser precision, 10 kilometers. The coronet has no trajectory. It flies straight, 10 meters above the ground, 4 meters above the ground. We have no defense for a coronet. It's already taken out and destroyed 25% of the houses in Metula. I want to tell you, and this is one of the essential challenges of Israel tomorrow. And if you thought we had another story, well, welcome to the present of Jewish history. How do we build, love, celebrate in the midst of danger? I didn't want this for my kids. I didn't want it for my grandchildren. Well, one of the lessons of Jewish history is you don't always get what you want. And what are you going to do? I've always believed that the greatest heroes in Jewish history, the greatest heroes weren't the Maccabees, wasn't the IDF. The greatest heroes that I have ever met in Jewish history are the people who left Auschwitz and had children. Who left Auschwitz and built Jewish communities. I sit down and I think about them and I am overcome by the feeling of smallness, of insignificance. What type of courage did it require? If I, chas v'shalom, survived Auschwitz, I'm in the South Pole. I'm either leaving Judaism or I only want to have a relationship with penguins. People, I'd have given up on the human race. Our parents and grandparents didn't. We're here because of their courage. Israel is here because of their courage. And for years and years in Israel, especially before 67, the embracing of Zionism was about building and protecting Israel, but knowing that we are going to build a life, we're going to build culture, we're going to build ideas, we're going to build songs, and we're going to celebrate. And know that we don't have all the security that we want, all the security that we have a right to. This is going to be part of Israel tomorrow, my friends. The temptation will be to have people lie to us. And it'll make us feel good for a few hours, maybe a few days, a few months. There is a realism that we have to begin to embrace with regards to the reality of our existence, which is going to force us to be stronger than we've ever before. A strength of character. Not to mourn. I'm not pessimistic. That same people who were never defeated will not be defeated, and Israel will live and Israel will thrive. It's just going to be harder. Our kids who go to the army, we're going to have to worry about them. We're going to have to worry. We're going to have to go to funerals. We're going to have to engage in the rehabilitation of thousands of wounded soldiers. Thousands. My nephew was injured on the first day as he volunteered and rushed to Kfar Aza. And he was lightly injured. His elbow was shattered by a bullet. He's now completed his third surgery in 3 months. Still can't move his elbow. And the nerves haven't yet returned, so he doesn't have access to his fingers. And he's the lightly injured one. How do you build a life in the midst of this uncertainty? How do you not succumb to despair? How do you take care of those in need, but still embrace aspirations and build a thriving, exciting country? That's the first challenge of Israel tomorrow. And in doing so, the second challenge is that this reality could create not despair, but a tremendous amount of anger. Who could I blame for this reality? Who's the messenger? Who was at fault? Who ruined my fantasy? The second challenge of Israel is not to succumb to a self-destructive, divisive blame game between right and left and center and this one and religious and secular. And each one is going to say, yes, my soldiers were the ones who did this. And the sectarian instinct, which we Jews are so comfortable with. We really don't feel good unless we're hating somebody. Unless we feel we're better than somebody. Unless we believe that somebody else is the problem for everything. You're my problem. How do we not allow a return to that? The slogan of this war is Biyachad Ninatzeach. Together we will be victorious. But one of the realities of all tragedy is that we know tragedy is not a perpetual unifier. It creates a sense of unity for a short time, and then it dissipates. So now we're united because we have a single cause, or we did. Some notion of victory. Now we can't even agree on what that victory will be, but at least for months we felt everybody was under the stretcher. But a society is powerful, not when it has a singular shared purpose. It's not unified when everybody agrees. It's unified when we learn how to live with disagreement. Disagreement doesn't undermine collective unity. How you treat disagreement is what threatens collective identity and unity. The second challenge of Israel is that despite the difficulties and our natural inclination to say it's your fault, Netanyahu was you. And Netanyahu is going to say, no, it was you. And this one's going to say, no, it was you. You're the one. At 2:00 at night, the head of intelligence, the head of the Southern Command, and the head of the Shabbat get a report of an imminent Hamas attack. They meet at 2:00 at night. They meet from 2:00 to 3:00. At 3:00, they decide to reconvene at 8:00 in the morning. They don't tell the chief of staff. They don't tell Netanyahu. And they don't put any emergency measures in place. Welcome to Israel. So who's to blame? Great, let's blame them. Those three. Now I got it. We might want political change. We might deserve political change. But to succumb to a self-destructive and I believe also dishonest blame game There's a difference between who is responsible and who's to blame. You want to know who's to blame? Me. Me and every other fellow citizen of Israel who didn't want our kids to fight in Gaza. And we loved the story that our Air Force was going to come and it was going to fly above and it was going to throw some bombs. And in 7 days, Netanyahu would declare a remarkable victory. And maybe we would have a few soldiers go in, and then we'd go home, and we'd say, yes, stability has returned. We're to blame. Responsibility? If you're a political leader, by definition, you're responsible. That's what leadership means. And you have to step aside, not because you're to blame, but because the purpose of political leadership is to serve the people. And if something failed, it is your job to say it's time for someone else to do this. But there's a difference between doing that and a blame game. And I want to tell you, I see it happening. I see it. Each one already now has a narrative just waiting to come out. They don't even have to press the button because they've already pressed it. And they're claiming, no, and every community has its substandard, subclass politicians. You might know some people like that here who have no shame. There's no shame. They speak vulgarly. They attack without any sensitivity. They tell you you're frightened. Well, that's the enemy. That's the them. How do we begin a process of moving forward without just maintaining a notion of together we will be victorious during war? But how do we develop a culture of political discourse? And we don't have the luxury I don't know if you have that luxury, but our neighborhood is too dangerous. Our life is too dangerous. We can afford 2-3 years of this type of discord, this type of mutual hatred. Our soldiers don't tolerate it. They go, and with a remarkable sense of purpose, say, I'm willing to give. Now, can we give for the well-being of a society, not only in times of combat? That's the second challenge of Israel tomorrow. Third challenge. It's on a very different level. Echoes some of what I said last night, but not really. War. Any of you who have been in war, any of you who have fought in war, war changes you. Whether you want or not, you're not the same person. When Ecclesiastes says there's a time to kill and a time to heal, when you enter into a time to kill, you are changed. No matter how much you want, you are changed. And the nature of this time is you begin, like I said in shul this morning, you start concentrating on who is yours and who's not yours. 20% of Israeli society, the Israeli Arabs, have had now 100 and close to 30 days of profound challenges. Like American Jews, they have dual loyalties. You love Israel, and you love America. Israeli Arab Palestinians want to be loyal citizens of Israel, but their family has been killed in Gaza, and that they are upset is natural. Not 2% like the Jews, 20%. They are key to healing and moving out of a time to kill. Gazans, Judea and Samaria, that's filled with security risks and security dilemmas. These are fellow citizens. For us to heal and to move forward, to go back into life, to re-engage a time to heal, it's critical that we as a society begin to reach out not only to Jews, but to the non-Jews, Jewish citizens of our society. To begin to transcend an over-obsessive, potential for an over-obsessive nationalism, which, by the way, there are forces in Israel, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, who that's exactly what they're counting on. They are counting that the emotional, ideological experience of war is going to define your existence afterwards. They're counting on it. We as a people have to be able to fight any Palestinian who wants to kill us without declaring war on the Palestinian people who are fellow citizens. And if we do that, we're going to start emerging from a time to kill to a time to heal. We're going to begin to put in place the type of nationalism that I spoke about in Shul, which combines particularism and universalism. The fourth challenge, and in many ways, I believe the most important. On October 6th, we had completed 10 of the most glorious months in Israeli society. It started horrifically. We thought it was the end of democracy. We thought it was the end of our country. Judicial reform was never about who picks the Supreme Court. What is the control of the executive over the judiciary? The judicial reform, not the individual parts of it, the judicial reform in its totality threatened to undermine the core definition of Israel as a democracy. And Israelis who only showed up on a regular basis for military service showed up and said, we are now going to fight for not just the borders of Israel, but the soul and identity of the country within our borders. And 10 months of demonstrations, 10 months of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. Stood up and said the future of Israel is not going to be determined only by who our external enemies are, but what we stand for. What do I stand for as a people? What is a Jewish democratic state? And you know why Israelis never had to think about it before? Because it says, I don't have to protect it. The Supreme Court's going to protect it. That's their job. I'm going to vote on foreign policy and economics, on human rights, freedom of religion, democracy. Thank God I have an overactive Supreme Court. They'll take care of it. But when our Supreme Court was threatened, every Israeli had to ask themselves, who do you want to be? And a remarkable period ensued in which Israelis were talking about, what is a Jewish democracy? What type of country do I want to be in? What are human rights for Jews, non-Jews, women, gays, lesbians, religious, secular? All of a sudden, it started with the Supreme Court, but a whole spectrum of issues became mainstream conversation around Shabbos tables. That's where we do politics in Israel. Every Saturday night, I'd show up. I had my place. It was like a seat in shul. And the demonstrations were like my shul. It was my community. And what was formed in Israel was a new coalition, a coalition that transcended the old center, left, right divides. A coalition which said, I don't know if Abu Mazen wants peace, and I don't know what the borders of Israel should be, and maybe we're going to disagree about that, but I do believe that Israel must be a Jewish democracy. And a new majority was formed, a new coalition, who disagreed about policy, but did not disagree about the core values of our country. The fourth challenge that we face for Israel tomorrow is, how do we go back to October 6th conversations? The need for them hasn't dissipated. We haven't solved the problems. They're just waiting. And the Supreme Court might not be in danger, but the core questions of what a Jewish democracy means. How do we Jews live together in one country even though we don't agree about Judaism? What does it mean to have a Jewish state in which 20% of the citizens aren't Jewish? How do we deal with profound issues of social justice, health? 2 Shabbases ago, I think, I was in the hospital with my mother-in-law, who was in the internal ward 3 at a hospital that won't be named. It was filthy. I thought I was in the 17th century. How do we talk about the rights of patients? How do we talk about medical care, social justice? See, October 7th quiets everything. And the immediate security concerns are real. But for Israel to continue to live, we have to go back to October 6th conversations. We had to build 3 hospitals 10 years ago. And now, post-October 7th, we're cutting the budget. And it's true, we have to spend 220 billion shekel now over the next 3 years on the military, because we have to rethink our whole conception of the military. From a small, highly technological, elite units to much more massive deployment. Because nobody's going to be able to go up north unless there are thousands of soldiers there every day. Not like we had in the south, where because there were some demonstrations in Judea and Samaria, we pulled 3/4 of the troops out and said, don't worry, we have cameras and I don't know what they're called, whatever. So we're going to have to spend, but we're also going to have to spend on what type of country we are. That's what at the end of the day we're fighting for. We're fighting to build a remarkable, just, kind, sensitive, aspirational life. How do we make those demands? How do we make that shift? Now, if I have any hope, it's because Israeli society was never defeated. We never let each other down. And we never failed. And in the Israel of tomorrow, it's going to be up to us to build the psychology of hope and joy in the midst of uncertainty. It's going to be up to us to take responsibility for our culture of debate. It's going to be up to us to shift from the potential inclination to ultranationalism that grows out of the time to kill and a time of war. It'll be up to us to say, yes, October 7th happened and it transformed us, but I want to go back to October 6th. And the future of Israel is going to be dependent on us reclaiming that conversation. And in the end, there's also an Israel of tomorrow for you. The massacre and horrors of October 7th are not going to unify you for a very long time. And they're not going to be the source of your Zionism. Right now, you're marshaled. Right now, it excites you. Right now, you are also, in your ways, just like Israeli citizens, and you're fantastic. Just like every Israeli citizen. You're buying pizza for soldiers who don't need pizza. There's even these cute things about soldiers saying, yeah, I want a third. You know, there's two types of tefillins. I want 2 pairs of tefillin. I want this. You're remarkable, just like Israelis are. You can't go into a pizza store in Israel without the guy saying, you want a pizza? Are you willing to match your pizza for a soldier's pizza? It's like, this is what we do. Your care, your concern has been a source of great, great comfort for Israelis. We know we're not alone. But your challenge for Israel tomorrow is to recognize that October 7th can't define your relationship with Israel. And you're going to have to find new stories and narratives for what Israel means to you and means for you. For you, for your children, for your grandchildren. How do you tell a story of Zionism that's inspiring? How do you tell the story of Zionism in the midst of a world that's accusing us? First, they accused us of apartheid. Then they accused us of being a colonial empire. And now they're accusing us of being a genocidal state. And to think that you could just shut those down, it's not going to happen. How do you tell a story? What we really need from you is for you to have your story of Zionism, your love for the country, your commitment, your recognition that Israel might not always be everything that it can be, and it certainly is going to be living in the midst of danger and struggles for years to come. But despite that uncertainty, you're still going to be there. But you're going to be there doesn't start with action. October 7th, you were drafted. Your souls were drafted. Just like we in Israel were drafted. But at the end, Zionism is not about being drafted. Zionism is about embracing a relationship with Israel as an integral part of what it means to be a Jew around the world. And we're going to tell different stories. And you too are going to have to learn how to live with people who disagree without vilifying them, without calling them traitors. At 6:30 in the morning, when the sirens went off, Israel was not destroyed. We lost that day, but we're still alive. We're harmed. We're traumatized. But we're still strong and we're still alive. And our challenge is to think about Israel tomorrow. With all of its complexity, with all of its uncertainty, but also with all of its remarkable promise. Thank you. Thank you.
We're going to engage in a Q&A.
Can I help? Do we want to move this?
Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it.
Thank you so much. have the microphone.
They will.
Okay.
But just in case. Yes, please.
Okay. Hear this all right? All right. First of all, thank you for a wonderful evening last night, a wonderful afternoon today. And I wanted to start off where you left off. I was in Israel right after Thanksgiving, so end of November. And I was most taken. Oh, there, you're right. You don't have a microphone. Oh. Okay. Just listen to myself talk.
Thank you, sir.
That's a good point there.
Yeah.
So what I was most taken with, and Christopher, can you take this? That's okay, got it. Was what you explained in terms of a shifting Zionistic identity for those who were visiting Israel. I was with the Board of Rabbis and a mission of LA clergy. And as you described, every Israeli came up to us. Why are you here? We're so grateful that you're here. We've never felt closer to the United States than we do today. And it made me recollect and think about past trips in which, yes, we've always felt such a close and deep tie to the land of Israel, but we didn't necessarily feel as if the tie was mutual. No one was thanking us before for coming unless we were visiting a shop. And so I'm curious, as you're asking us to redefine our Zionism post-October 7th, not letting October 7th define diaspora Jewry's relationship to Israel, do you see Israelis having a redefined relationship with the diaspora? And will that story shift as we go further and further away from October 7th?
Thank you. A really good question. Israelis felt closest to diaspora Jewry last year.
Interesting.
Last year, as they were beginning to embrace Jewish democracy, liberal Zionism, and I'm not going to go into it again, remember it's not the same as your liberal conservative here in America. As that word was becoming a mainstream word in Israel, when they were talking about human rights, they looked, and who were their partners? You. The Israeli government had the power to pass the one law that was most dangerous. They had 64 seats. It was part of the coalition agreement. It was called the override clause. And that override clause was singularly the most dangerous legislation. That override clause would enable a majority in the Knesset, i.e. the executive, because in Israel the legislative and the executive are the same, to override anything that the judiciary determined to be obligatory. 61 seats, and every coalition has at least 61, could basically override the ability of the Supreme Court to shape the nature of Israel's democracy. And with that override clause alone, Israel would become a majoritarian democracy, which is a form of totalitarianism. There would be no more rule of law, no more semi-constitutional human rights. Anything the majority would want, they would get. And the ultra-Orthodox parties had placed this as a condition of their coalition. Because they said from the beginning, I don't care who sits on the Supreme Court, what do I care? Knock yourself out. Put whoever you want. I just want to know, am I immune to the decisions of the Supreme Court? Because I want to be able to decide whatever I want on issues of state and religion and on the drafting of Haredim and on an education. I don't want you to pass a law that's going to implicate me And I know that I'm always going to be necessary in any coalition, so I want the override clause. The override clause was never brought up to vote because even though the government has all the power, so-called, turns out that a government can't do anything at once. The street counted. But you know who else counted? You did. Your partnership with Israel empowered the anti-judiciary people, gave us extra access, gave us greater soft power. Governments have hard power. But it turns out that hard power is not that fantastic. America's discovered that. Russia's discovered that. Israel's discovering it. China never uses hard power. They use soft power. The coalition of Israelis and world Jewry who joined together around a pluralistic, democratic Jewish state was the key engine which enabled us to defeat the override clause. Now, October 7th seems like we're more united than ever. It's in a month. In a month. The real connection is when you believe that you have partners in Israel and Israel believes that we have partners here. And for many Israelis, it's going to be unnatural. You know, being rude is part of our inalienable right. Your job is to support and shut up. Some of us, but Israelis remember, last year was remarkable. There was a new coalition, not just in Israel, but between Israel and world Jewry. And the deep coalition is not going to be built around ceramic vests. Now, when we need ceramic vests, you got to be there. But that's not the coalition. It's like a family. Like, I make more money than my kids. And that's the nature of Israeli life. Until kids are 40, they can't support themselves. And they can't. It's just the nature of it. I don't see my salary as mine. It belongs to the family. We're a family. It's our job to take care of each other. But the nature of my relationship to my children is not built on my ability or the fact that I financially give them assistance. We have a joint life together. And your job, it's very enticing. Also for parents. It's much easier to buy a relationship than to actually build one. But that's not what family and what we want to be. And so the fact that you showed up on October 7th and that you stopped everything and did everything in your power is what family does. But at the end of the day, it's about creating a shared purpose together that's going to have the long-lasting effect.
Thank you. And to that point, and first of all, this is a congregation that has stood and continues to stand with Israel. It's part of our mission. It's what defines Sinai Temple. And we wanted to show that continued relationship. We have a mission going in May for those who are interested in joining us for Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut. It's not a one-time trip.
Right.
This is a chance for us to come together as a community to show our long-standing relationship. I just want to shift the conversation for a moment. We're speaking about diaspora Jewry, but as you brought up last night, perhaps one of the reasons why October 7th was chosen, as you described, was because of the nearing solidification and normalization of relationships with Saudi Arabia. And so I'm wondering if you could just speak for a few moments about these surrounding Arab countries, and especially the countries in which Israel was having renewed talks, renewed relationships, normalization. How much do those relationships play in the Israel of tomorrow?
I I chose not to speak about this, but you're right to ask me.
I'm not rude, but I can't be pushy.
No, you're right. It's one of the elephants in the room. One of the great victories of Hamas was not in their ability to massacre 1,200 Israelis and to alter the normalcy of our life. One of the great victories of October 7th was their ability to succor us into moving into Gaza and to creating a protracted, if that's the right word, war. And in so doing, raise the awareness of the Palestinian cause. Now, it's not that overnight anybody cares about the Palestinians. None of them do. You don't want to be a Palestinian. It's a miserable life. Nobody cares about you. Nobody cares about you. You don't have a government. Not only do you not have a government by the people, Abbas is in the 17th year of his 4-year presidency. True. But you also don't have a government for the people. You've never experienced a government for the people. You never experienced a leadership that doesn't steal from you, doesn't manipulate you, doesn't terrorize you. You never have. And the world doesn't care about you. But there are forces in the world which realize that the great destabilizer is Iran and the Shiite coalition. And when Palestinians are the spear of a Shiite coalition, all of a sudden they become important. Not because we care about this. The cynicism is beyond. So the world says, yes, two-state solution. Now, I'm center-left. As I think I said last night, I feel religiously obligated to create a Palestinian state. But frankly, I don't have a clue what would be the first, second, and third steps that I would do to create one now. So when everybody says the two-state solution, it's more or less people saying, children, stop it, you're bothering me. That's what it is. Stop it. You're ruining my plans. My shipping lanes, my stuff. It's costing, just stop it. Two-state solution. What are you even talking about? Now, I'm ready. I think there's things that we could do, steps that we could take to stop making it worse. But right now, forget two states, what does even Gaza tomorrow look like? Do you know what we're looking for now in Gaza? You know what America and Saudi Arabia and Egypt are looking for? They are looking for a Western-inclined dictator who will be able to terrify more than Hamas can. That's what they're looking for. And they know the Palestinian Authority can't play that role because Hamas does stuff, they try, but they've lost all credibility and all control. So what are we looking for? So what does it even mean? I don't even know how. This is part of the problem with Gaza. We got into it without a clear strategy and without any clear objective of how we implement that strategy. Now, one thing we do know, and without a semblance of commitment to some form of desire to create a two-state solution, even over time, the Saudis aren't going to join. They're all meeting. It's there. They've said it already. It's just not going to be. But Israeli society doesn't even know how to think about the question. We don't even know how to even internalize what that means. Because we have literally murderers running around in Hebron, Tulkarem, Jenin, Ramallah, Shechem. What are we even talking about? So even though I want one, I don't want somebody telling me you need a solution, which at the end of the day, like, oh, you just work, and you'll work out the details. So it's just, but at the end, we're going to have to be prepared for that conversation. Now, Israel was prepared for that conversation. And here, I'm just going to say a word. I'm going to say the T word. And I hope you'll just adjust. Israel was prepared for that conversation with the Trump peace plan, which, in my estimation, was the most positive, hopeful political platform for creating peace between, or the beginning of peace between Israelis and Palestinians. But because it was Trump, liberals politically in America never took it seriously. And as a result, Mahmoud Abbas said, I don't take it seriously. And so he didn't even respond. And but Israel, I remember when Trump was sitting there, he said, Bibi, you're ready for serious compromises, aren't you? And Bibi had to say yes. And you probably don't even know what the Trump peace plan was. Trump peace plan on one foot involved Judea and Samaria is divided between area A, B, and C. Area A are the cities, which have political and military control of the Palestinian Authority. Area B are smaller towns, which are under political control of the Palestinian Authority, but military control of Israel. Area C is wherever Jews live and the roads around them. And they're under political and military control of Israel. The Trump peace plan said Area C is staying with Israel for now. There's no willingness, no desire, no possibility to dismantle settlements, to remove people. It's not even on the table. But let's, at stage one, create a Palestinian state in Area A and B with a presence in Jerusalem and a claim that Jerusalem is your capital, part of Jerusalem. Now, it's a big deal. It was actually brilliant. It's brilliant. Jared Kushner, who pushed it, deserves huge credit for an idea that nobody even took seriously. Unfortunately, imagine where we would be now. Imagine where we would be now. When the Saudis are willing to enter into a deal, they want to know, at least in theory, are we ready to think in those directions? But it's going to be challenging because Israelis right now have zero degree of confidence that forget a Palestinian leadership, that there's a Palestinian society that they could trust. And so we're going to be out of sync. World political currents are going to be out of sync with Israeli ones. You here in North America are going to be subject to numerous conversations and ideologies or I don't know you, but 70% of North American Jews do align themselves with the political liberal community, for whom a two-state solution was always part, but you could see it emerging. And Israelis don't even know how to think about it right now. And it's going to cause tension. And it's just yet another example of how October 7th is not going to be enough. We're going to need shared values and an ability to talk with each other. And most of all, we're going to need some time. But it's back on the table. But how and what you do with it now that it's on the table is more confusing now than it has ever been.
We want to open up Q&A to our audience here. Christopher's in the back with a microphone. We'll take 2 or 3 questions for now. I just want to say I reserve the right for the last question.
First of all, I've totally enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you. I have a feeling the microphone isn't working or I'm not hearing it.
Check 1, 2.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good.
It's hard to say it was a pleasure in so many ways, but it was enlightening and got us all to really think very hard about the crises and the problems that we face in the future. And as you pointed out so well, it's not about October the 7th, it's about what happens once the dust settles and where do we go from here. And on that basis, I have a question which is difficult to articulate, but it has to do with people outside of Israel, and especially in this country, where Hamas did another very dynamic thing that changed the nature of our society in polarizing it to such a great extent. You know, as a member of the Jewish community and having a lot of grandchildren and children, and thank God they're all highly identified, we've always felt that by following Jewish tradition and giving our children and grandchildren Jewish educations, that this would have a profound effect on not only the future of our own children, but it would also permeate American society and change the nature of so many people's views on Israel and on being Jewish. That bubble has burst in so many ways. And as an American now, who has a responsibility to family and to our country and to Israel, the question is, how do we then make these kinds of changes in the changing society where, first of all, it is so polarized. We have, as you said, so many Jewish kids that are identified with the left wing and see Israel in a very controversial context. And then, of course, we now have what's going on college campuses, where there has been a tremendous change. There's lots of talk about maybe the Jewish community should support lesser colleges now and change the emphasis, because it may be an uphill fight in the prestigious universities where we really don't have a leg to stand on and there's nothing we can really do about it. And I think all of this has to be looked at in the context of everything else that you've said. Where do we go from here as an American society, and how do we continue to make a difference for our own safety and for the safety of Israel? Thank you.
It's a huge, I'm thinking about it all the time. I don't have fully worked out anything. I'll just share with you just some initial thoughts, just to join in the complexity of the challenge that you're putting in front of us. And I thank you for it. We have raised our children in North America to be integrated into American society. And therefore, any notion that we are not going to be influenced by American discourse runs counter to everything that we have worked to build here in North America. As distinct from Europe, in North America, we have chosen not to build ghettos. We send our kids outside. Integration, being an American, is a core part of the gift and opportunity of America. And as a result, any hope that you're going to be able to insulate them is a false hope. And that means our children are going to ask questions very different than the questions that we have asked. And the answers that they're going to look for are going to be different than the answers that we felt. And part of what it's going to require is expanding what the pro-Israel camp means. Because it can't just be us, because then our kids are going to be outside. Questioning cannot be an act of disloyalty. Even silly declarations can't be acts of betrayal. In this tumultuous time, our kids are going to reflect some of the cultural and also some of the diseases of American society. And so how we could protect, one of the ways of protecting is keeping them inside. Because the minute they feel they are leaving, then we've given Hamas and Iran the ultimate victory. The ultimate victory. Hold on. Hold on to your kids. Redefine the boundaries. Redefine them. No matter how much it aggravates you, redefine them. No matter what questions they make, and even if they give the questions and they pose them in the form of declarations, keep them inside. If the only place that a moral discourse about Gaza or Israel's policies happens in If Not Now or Jewish Voices for Palestine, then we're going to lose the next generation. And every time we try to set boundaries, no, you're not allowed to show this movie, you're not allowed to bring that speaker, whenever you do that, you lose 10%. It's automatic. And I'm telling you, I'm in this, I've been working with American colleges and students for years now. Many of us, we have to apply what Mark Twain said. She means well in the worst sense of the term. We're trying to turn millennials, or what's the other ones? Gen, whatever. There's too many, they change too quickly. Yeah, whatever it is. I got millennials, so I'm just going to call them all millennials. We have a myth that the purpose of Israel education is to turn millennials into 70-year-olds. And it's true. That's what we want to do. Shh. Part of the way we win is not by defending ourselves first and foremost against the anti-Semitic enemy. Part of the way we win is by making sure that we embrace the multiplicity of our community so that they're inside. Now, interestingly enough, we learned how to do that when it came to intermarriage. Some of you are old enough to remember. I certainly grew up that way, where intermarriage meant leaving the Jewish people. It meant assimilation. It's over. Well, many of you decided you're going to your kid's wedding, and by the way, I would too. My kids know I'm a very maternal father. Anything that they do, I'm there. I don't have to, I'm there. No, there's nothing you're going to do other than driving a motorcycle that's going to cause me to walk away from you. And we did that. And now non-Jewish spouses, we're competing. We're competing. So what we did on interfaith marriages, we're going to have to do when it comes to Zionism. And it's not going to be easy. And then the second part, which is much bigger, which I can't get into, I am hoping that there will be a backlash against what I believe is a morally bankrupt ideology amongst some of the progressives in America. I don't think it's wrong, I think it's morally bankrupt. And I think and you know, I'll just give you a little hope, but I don't want you to feel too good. Do you notice that already for 10 years, every statistic speaks about 18 to 24-year-olds? You ever wonder why after 10 years we're not talking about 18 to 34-year-olds? We have an over-focus on 18 to 24 and on the campus experience, which has impact. We have to worry about it, we have to fight about it. But a university reality is a distorted reality in which children come and disconnect from their roots and their families. They enter into a universalist, multicultural blog led by some people who have tenure. tenure is a tough thing, who have a power base. And campuses were always a place for fermenting certain ideas, which very often had much truth to them, but they needed to be moderated, and they're not built to moderate them. Now, because our kids go there, we're very nervous, and rightfully so. Many of our kids feel unsafe now on campuses. And maybe we have to find ways to fight that, and maybe it means what constitutes the right campus for our child might change. By the way, Orthodoxy has been doing that for years, where they send their kids to a campus where there is a vibrant Jewish life, that they know their kids from a kosher kitchen to a minyan, and so they have multiple values in how you do that. But I think our job, and this is part of what I said last night, I don't yet know how to defeat this morally bankrupt ideology, which is now identifying the Jews as the ultimate evil and Israel as that ultimate evil. I don't know if there's anything that I could say that's going to change them. What I do know is that the majority of Americans and liberals are not with them. And I believe they are now overstepping. Part of the thing that's hurting us now is the bipartisanship of America. Because if the lead against this ideology is in the Trump camp, it's very hard for Jews to be a part of that conversation. And it's very hard for liberals to be a part of it. So I haven't answered the core of your question. But A, don't let anybody go. And then we have a chance. B, the phenomena itself is, I believe, over magnified because we're worried. And 3, we have many allies that we could reach out to. And there is a 4th, which I'm not going to get into. I think Israel has a moral responsibility to help you also. And through certain policies that we could implement without harming our security, we can make the case for Israel much stronger. It's not just public relations, it's also policy. And Israel has a government who for many years is creating a reality in which it is very hard for your children to identify and to see Israel as a partner in their values. And so that's just a beginning of a thought, but we have much work to do.
Moving back to Israel and the future, I have 2 quick interlocking questions. Question 1 is, I've heard that 20% of the total population of Israel's eligible Army students, Army eligible, are Hardim. And if that's the case, can you address the ultra-Orthodox positions, whether it's Shas, whether it's Chabad, in relation to the drafting of ultra-Orthodox soldiers, and how that will affect your position about how many more soldiers we need in the future of Israel to protect the country? Thank you.
Thank you. Also, great question. The dirty, or not the dirty, the secret that no one of us, we didn't like to talk about, is that Israel didn't want to draft Haredim. We didn't want to draft the ultra-Orthodox. They're bad soldiers. They don't come at 18, they come at 22. They're not good. They create problems they don't live well with other people. They create problems for women in the army and secular in the army. Many of them implemented, we just had to take a whole division of Haredi soldiers out of Judea and Samaria because of systemic abuse of power. The army didn't want them. Post-October 7th, and we didn't need them because we had enough. It was more a political ploy than an actual strategic need. That's changed now. And now the job of a coalition, and if it's not, the demonstrations are starting, because right now the government is tabling to put, not to take away, to put forth a legislation which involves increasing military service from 30 months to 36, and it was on the way down to 28, quadrupling the amount of time that reservists can be called up, and at the same time, accepting Haredi exemption. And there's a whole revolt beginning to happen. I don't see it returning to the same calculation. Haredim are going to have to play a role. How we do so is not simple. Because the reason why Haredim do not want to serve in the army is not because they don't care about the country. That's maybe 1% of Haredim today. The ultra-Orthodox community have become Zionists. They don't serve because they don't know how to send their kids to the army at 18 and still keep them ultra-Orthodox. The reason why they want them to stay in yeshiva is not to study only, it's they want you to be married and have 2 children. And when you're married and have 2 children, you're not going to go through an identity transformation. Haredim are petrified by the enticement of secular ideology, and they don't know yet how to deal with it. And so they're going to have to participate. The country's going to insist on it. We don't know yet how to do it in an effective manner. But that will be one of the decisions. And it might require, this government won't be able to do it, but a future coalition of center, right, left, which will be about, everybody's claiming it's going to be about, post-Netanyahu, it'll be at least 70 seats. Haredim might join, but they're not going to be the balance of power in the coalition. Then there'll be room for another type of conversation. But it is a big unknown and a correct question to ask.
Okay, let's take one more.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Tori. I'm a rabbinical student at Hebrew Union College. I want to ask you a question about yourself instead of a question about Israel. And I'm curious, since October 7th, where has your relationship with God gone?
We don't have a huge amount of time for this. It's a whole, literally, it's another weekend. But sitting here in the room is my dear, dear, dear friend, Gordon Cunin, who I have been walking with him and talking about these questions since 1986. And I'm very, very honored that he's here. And he certainly doesn't want to hear me go into this right now, because he knows. I've had a challenging relationship with God my whole life. And just literally on one foot. The only way I could continue to believe in God and be an observant Jew was to believe, as I said last night, that God created human beings to rule the world, and then God left. I haven't asked anything of God since I was 15. And so, October 7th, just like the Holocaust, is the byproduct of our enormous capacity to evil. And it's not a symptom of God's failure. As Woody Allen has says correctly, it's not that God exists. Yes, I believe that God exists. But at least when it's come to the Jewish people, God's been an underachiever. That wasn't me, that's Woody Allen, but I happen. So it hasn't, for me, it hasn't created a theological crisis. For many Israelis, It's become a source of need, looking for comfort. There's a lot of prayer amongst the soldiers. There's a lot of prayer amongst family members. Because the nature of most of us, myself excluded, is that when we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we don't want to walk alone. And for some, October 7th could be a symptom of profound alienation and disappointment. But overall, a very famous anthropologist said that chaos doesn't undermine faith in God. Chaos makes faith in God necessary. And October 7th was very, very chaotic. That's literally with hints and on one foot. I hope it's enough.
I thank Tori for asking that question because we got a chance to share a little bit and see your theology, and I appreciate that. I want to conclude this morning. Last night was so rooted in Torah, and you gave us so many lessons of faith and humanity to hold on to, as well as this morning, thinking about our role as Jewish people and our role as human beings. And I'm wondering if you will please leave us this afternoon giving us a little bit of the Torah we need for Israel to succeed tomorrow.
As some of you who listen to the podcast know, I'm changing my mind all the time. Sue me. I can only know what I know at the time that I know it. And so it's like it's a roller coaster. At this precise moment, just right now, I want to teach Leviticus 19, verse 1 and 2. And God spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak unto the children of Israel and say unto them, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy." And there is no religious tradition parallel to Judaism which would have the chutzpah to say such a sentence. Because if God is holy, I don't need to be holy. I couldn't be holy. That's yours. You got holy. I'm a human. We're part of a tradition which says you have to constantly strive to be more than who you are. And I love the term holiness because no one has a clue what it means. It just more or less means more. A tradition which says, "You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy," is a tradition which says that to be a Jew is to fight mediocrity. And you're never going to succeed. It doesn't say you are holy. Being a chosen people doesn't mean anything about who we are. Actually, our tradition thinks we're profoundly mediocre. And it says it over and again. But it says because you are mediocre, it doesn't mean that that's what I'm going to let you be. And one of the 613 commandments is that we have to be the enemy of mediocrity. And we have to be a people who fight and go to war. Confront fear, uncertainty, and trauma. And experiences that if any other country in the world would dominate us. And our job is to not ignore them, but to say, "Af al pi ken." Despite that, I have a journey that I'm commanded to embark on every single day of my life. For me right now, God spoke to Moses saying, "Speak unto the children of Israel and say unto them, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy," is the most important piece of Torah that I'm struggling with and that I feel that I have to answer to.
I hope you'll join me in thanking Rabbi Hartman for a beautiful, beautiful afternoon.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
And before you go, please join me in another round of applause in thanking Abner and Roz for just a fantastic Scholar in Residence series. And a reminder that tomorrow, I want to look for people who know, 9:30?
9:30.
Thank you, I should look at you. 9:30 a.m. tomorrow morning. There is still room to register for the breakfast, so feel free to join us 9:30 tomorrow morning. Thank you, everyone. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.